The ballroom glittered with 1,000 candles, their light dancing off silk gowns and jeweled throats, but Lillian Fairmont couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just agreed to walk into a trap. "Go on then," Lavinia Hartwick urged, her smile too bright, too eager. "You said you wanted to prove you're not afraid of London society. Well, here's your chance." The challenge had seemed harmless enough 5 minutes ago, wrapped in giggles and champagne-loosened tongues. A simple dare, they'd called it. A rite of passage for every newcomer to the season. Ask a gentleman to dance, any gentleman of their choosing. She should have known better. The man they'd selected stood near the terrace doors, isolated in a way that made the crowded ballroom feel deliberately arranged around his absence. Tall, dark-haired, impeccably dressed, he surveyed the room with the expression of someone attending his own funeral. No one approached him. No one even glanced in his direction for more than a heartbeat before looking quickly away. "Why him?" Lillian had asked, doubt finally creeping past her eagerness to belong. "Oh, he's perfectly safe," another girl, Clara something, had assured her. "Just terribly dull. No one dances with him because he never smiles, never converses. You'll do your duty and escape after one dance. Simple." But the way they watched her now, barely suppressed laughter in their eyes, made her stomach twist. Too late to retreat. She'd accepted the dare in front of a dozen witnesses, and backing down would mark her as a coward for the rest of the season. Her Aunt Constance had brought her to London for opportunity, not humiliation. Lillian smoothed her pale blue gown, simple compared to the elaborate confections surrounding her, and crossed the ballroom floor. Each step felt louder than the orchestra. Conversations seemed to pause in her wake. By the time she reached him, her cheeks burned with awareness of every eye tracking her progress. The man didn't acknowledge her approach. He stood perfectly still, watching something in the garden beyond the terrace with an intensity that suggested he found the darkness infinitely more interesting than the glittering assembly behind him. "Excuse me," Lillian said, pleased that her voice emerged steady. "I wonder if you might do me the honor of the next dance." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly he turned to face her. His eyes were startling, not the fashionable blue or green she'd expected, but a deep brown that held unexpected warmth despite the cool assessment in his gaze. He studied her with the attention her aunt gave to purchasing horses, thorough, measuring, looking for flaws. "You're new," he said, not a question. "I arrived last week from Yorkshire." She forced herself to meet his eyes, refusing to look away first. "My aunt is Constance Fairmont. Perhaps you know her." "I know of her." His attention shifted past her shoulder, scanning the room with deliberate slowness. When his gaze returned to her face, something almost like amusement flickered there. "And who, precisely, suggested you approach me?" The question landed like cold water. He knew. Of course he knew. She swallowed against sudden panic. The giggles behind her had grown louder. "It was my idea. A dare. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt my evening of standing alone in corners." He raised one eyebrow. "Don't apologize. It's the most interesting thing that's happened all night." He held out his hand, palm up, a clear challenge. "Though you should know what you're doing before you commit." "What I'm doing? Dancing with me." His voice dropped, quiet enough that only she could hear. "I'm Ashworth, the Duke of Ashworth." The world tilted slightly. Lillian's breath caught as understanding crashed over her. Not a boring wallflower, not a safe target for a harmless dare. A duke, one of the most powerful men in England, standing alone because no one dared approach him without invitation. And she'd just walked up and asked him to dance like he was some country squire at a village assembly. The giggles had dissolved into shocked whispers. Somewhere behind her, she heard Lavinia's strangled gasp. They'd set her up perfectly. Provincial fool makes spectacle of herself by propositioning a duke. "I should go," Lillian whispered, taking a step backward. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry." His hand caught hers before she could retreat further, not forcefully, but with unmistakable intent. "Too late, Miss Fairmont." He drew her forward, his grip warm and steady. "You've made your request publicly. I've accepted. To refuse now would be far more scandalous than your innocent mistake." His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Besides, I haven't danced in 3 months. It might be amusing to remind everyone I still can. Before she could protest, he was leading her toward the dance floor. The crowd parted like water, conversations dying into stunned silence. The orchestra, as if sensing the moment, struck up a waltz. Lillian barely remembered how to breathe, let alone dance. "Relax," Ashworth murmured as he positioned them correctly, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers with unexpected gentleness. "You're not actually being led to the gallows despite appearances." "I feel like I am," she admitted. "Everyone's staring. They're always staring." He began to move and muscle memory took over, her feet following his lead. "The trick is deciding whether you care. Don't you? Not anymore." They turned smoothly through the first pattern, and she realized with surprise that he was an excellent dancer, assured without being showy, giving her space to find her rhythm. "Though I suspect you do. You're new enough to still want their approval." "Is that so terrible?" "Not terrible, just exhausting." His gaze flicked past her shoulder again, and this time his expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "And often disappointing." She followed his line of sight and caught a glimpse of an older woman in deep crimson, watching them with an expression of pure fury. Beside her stood a beautiful blonde girl whose pretty face had frozen into a mask of shock. "Who are they?" Lillian asked before she could stop herself. "Lady Wycliffe and her daughter Genevieve." Something dark flickered in his tone. "They've been working very hard to spread rumors that Miss Wycliffe and I have an understanding. Tonight was meant to be a demonstration of that supposed inevitability." Understanding dawned, "And by dancing with me instead, I've publicly indicated that any rumors of an engagement are premature at best." He executed a smooth turn that brought them momentarily closer. "So you see, Miss Fairmont, you've actually done me a favor, even if it was by accident." "I don't feel like I've done anyone a favor," she said honestly. "I feel like I've just stepped into something I don't understand." For the first time, his expression softened into something genuine. "Welcome to London. That feeling never entirely goes away." He paused, then added with unexpected gentleness, "But if it helps, your crime was innocence, not malice. That's rarer than you might think." The waltz ended too quickly and too slowly at once. Ashworth released her with perfect propriety, bowed, and stepped back. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Fairmont." His voice carried clearly across the hushed room. "I hope you enjoy the rest of your season." Then he walked away, leaving her standing alone in the center of the dance floor, while 300 people pretended not to watch. Lillian made it back to her aunt's side through sheer force of will, ignoring the whispers that erupted in her wake. "Well," Aunt Constance said dryly, taking her arm and steering her toward the refreshment table, "I did say you should make an impression on London society. I simply expected it to take more than 1 week." The next morning arrived with calling cards. 7 of them, to be precise, delivered before Lillian had finished her breakfast. Aunt Constance sorted through them with the efficiency of a general reviewing battle plans, her expression growing more thoughtful with each one. "Lady Pemberton, Mrs. Hartley, the Countess of Roxburgh." She tapped the cards against her palm. "All wanting to include you in their upcoming events." "How extraordinary." "Is it?" Lillian pushed her eggs around her plate, appetite gone. She'd barely slept, replaying the previous evening on an endless loop. "I thought I'd be a social pariah after last night." "My dear child." Her aunt set down the cards and fixed her with an amused look. "You danced with a duke who hasn't danced with anyone in months. You're not a pariah, you're a curiosity, and in London, curiosity is currency. But I didn't know he was a duke. Everyone knows that. They're probably laughing at me." "Some are," Constance agreed with characteristic bluntness. "The ones who arranged your little dare, for instance. But many more are wondering what you said to make him smile." "He didn't smile." "He nearly did. I was watching." Her aunt poured more tea, her movements precise. "Ashworth hasn't been seen enjoying himself since before his father died 2 years ago. The duchy came with considerable debt and political complications. He's been under tremendous pressure to marry advantageously, meaning Genevieve Wycliffe, whose family controls several crucial votes in Parliament." Lillian set down her fork. "Then I really did ruin something important. Or you gave him an evening's respite from being a commodity." Constance met her gaze directly. "Don't underestimate the value of that, Lillian. These people live in cages made of expectations. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is forget the bars exist. Before Lillian could respond, their butler entered with another card. This just arrived by special messenger, ma'am, for Miss Fairmont. The heavy cream stationery felt expensive in Lillian's hands. She broke the ducal seal, her heart skipping stupidly at the crest, and unfolded the note. The handwriting was bold and clear. Miss Fairmont, my mother is hosting a musical evening on Tuesday next. She has expressed interest in your skills at the pianoforte, of which your aunt spoke highly at Lady Pemberton's card party last month. I hope you will consent to perform. We dine at 7. Ashworth. Well, her aunt said, reading over her shoulder without shame. It seems your evening of social catastrophe has turned into an opportunity. Or another trap, Lillian said quietly. But even as she spoke, she was already planning what she would play. The Duke of Ashworth's London residence was everything Lillian had expected, and nothing she'd imagined. The house itself was imposing, creamstone and perfectly proportioned windows that spoke of old money and older power. But the gardens visible from the entrance hall showed signs of genuine care rather than mere display. Roses trained along walls, herbs planted in practical rows, a glimpse of fruit trees heavy with summer apples. Someone here loved growing things, not just owning them. Miss Fairmont. A tall, silver-haired woman descended the staircase with the posture of someone who'd never slouched in her life. I'm Eleanor Ashworth, the Duke's mother. Thank you for agreeing to come on such short notice. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. Lillian felt some of her tension ease. Thank you for the invitation, Your Grace. I'm honored. The honor is mine. Your aunt tells me you studied under Signor Martinelli in Yorkshire. I heard him perform once, years ago. An extraordinary technique. Eleanor's eyes, the same warm brown as her son's, assessed Lillian with interest rather than judgment. I confess I'm eager to hear what he's taught you. The drawing room was already full when they entered. Lillian recognized several faces from the ball, including Lavinia Hartwick, who had the grace to look uncomfortable when their eyes met. But there were also older guests. Music lovers, Lillian guessed, here for art rather than gossip. Ashworth stood near the fireplace, deep in conversation with two gentlemen she didn't recognize. He'd discarded his formal evening wear for something simpler, but no less well-tailored. Dark coat, cream waistcoat, cravat tied with more practicality than fashion. He looked younger somehow, less like a duke and more like a man. He glanced up as if sensing her attention, and for a moment their eyes met across the room. Then someone asked him a question, and the moment broke. Lillian, come meet some of my friends, Aunt Constance said, drawing her toward a group near the piano. Mrs. Hartley, may I present my niece? Lillian, Mrs. Hartley is one of the finest harpists in London. The next hour passed in a pleasant blur of introductions and musical discussion. It was nothing like the ball, no hidden barbs, no performance of belonging. These people cared about music the way she did, as something that mattered beyond social advantage. When dinner was announced, Lillian found herself seated between an elderly baronet who wanted to discuss Bach and a young woman who bred hunting dogs in Kent. Across from her, Ashworth carried on a debate about crop rotation with unexpected passion. The old three-field system is wasteful, he was saying, gesturing with his wineglass. If we rotated properly, using nitrogen-fixing crops— You sound like my father, Lillian interrupted without thinking. He converted our entire property to the four-course system 5 years ago. The wheat yields have increased by nearly 40%. Ashworth's attention snapped to her. Your father farms? We all do. Well, did. She felt suddenly self-conscious under his focus. I have 3 younger brothers. We all helped in the fields during harvest. My mother said idle hands were the devil's workshop, and she wasn't about to raise useless ornaments. Someone down the table laughed, not unkindly, just surprised. But Ashworth's expression had shifted into something intent. So you actually understand land management. You're not just familiar with the theory. I understand that good soil and hard work matter more than titles, she said carefully, if that's what you mean. That's exactly what I mean. He set down his glass. And you still found time to become an accomplished musician. My father said culture and capability weren't opposites. We worked the fields in daylight and played music by candlelight. She smiled slightly. Though my brothers complained, I got the better end of that bargain, since playing piano doesn't leave splinters. Your brothers sound wise. Was that amusement in his voice? I'm beginning to think Yorkshire produces remarkably practical people. We call it common sense, Lillian said. London calls it provincial. London, Ashworth said quietly, often confuses complexity with sophistication. Their eyes held for a moment too long. Then his mother rose to lead the ladies back to the drawing room, and the spell broke. The piano in the Ashworth drawing room was a magnificent instrument, a Broadwood grand with ivory keys that felt like silk under Lillian's fingers. She'd chosen Beethoven's Sonata No. 14 partly because she knew it well enough to lose herself in the performance, partly because the melancholy suited her mood. She closed her eyes and let muscle memory take over. The first movement flowed through her like water, soft and inevitable. She felt the room fall silent, felt the weight of attention, but it didn't matter. This was the one place where she'd never doubted herself, the one language she spoke fluently, no matter who was listening. When the final notes faded, silence held for a long moment before the applause broke. "Extraordinary," Eleanor Ashworth said, her voice carrying genuine emotion. "Miss Fairmont, you have a rare gift." The rest of the evening passed in a warm blur. People wanted to discuss her interpretation, ask about her training, request other pieces. Lillian played twice more, Mozart and then Chopin, and each time she felt the same sense of rightness. This, at least, she could do well. It wasn't until guests began departing that she found herself alone with Ashworth near the entrance hall. He'd been pulled into a dozen conversations throughout the evening, always polite, often engaged, but maintaining the same careful distance she'd noticed at the ball. Now, with most guests gone and his mother occupied with final farewells, that distance seemed to thin. "You didn't tell me you were that good," he said without preamble. "You didn't ask. You just sent an invitation." "Fair point." He studied her with that same assessing look. "Why Yorkshire? Martinelli could have secured you a position in London, Paris, Vienna. You could have performed professionally. My family was in Yorkshire." She met his gaze steadily. "That mattered more than a career impressing strangers. Even if it meant giving up something you clearly love?" "I didn't give it up. I just chose how to keep it." She paused, sensing something beneath his questions. "Why do you ask?" "Because I wonder if you regret it." His voice dropped lower. "Choosing roots over recognition, safety over possibility. Do you regret your choices?" she countered. For a moment she thought he might actually answer, but then Aunt Constance appeared to collect her, and Ashworth stepped back into the careful courtesy of a host, bidding guests farewell. "Thank you for performing tonight, Miss Fairmont. I hope we'll see you again. Thank you for inviting me, Your Grace." All proper, all correct, all utterly insufficient for the current running between them. In the carriage home, Aunt Constance remained uncharacteristically quiet until they were nearly back to Cavendish Square. "He likes you," she finally said. "He barely spoke to me all evening." "Exactly." Her aunt's smile was knowing. "He barely spoke to anyone, but he listened to you, watched you. That boy has forgotten how to want something without calculating its cost first." She patted Lillian's hand. "You reminded him that some things have value beyond utility. I played piano, Aunt Constance, that's all. Keep telling yourself that, dear." Her aunt settled back against the cushions. "Though I suspect you're both terrible liars when it comes to yourselves." Lillian said nothing, but she felt the weight of the evening settle around her shoulders like a cloak she hadn't asked to wear. 3 days later, another invitation arrived. A garden party at the Ashworth country estate, 20 miles outside London. Half the ton would be there. And, the note mentioned almost casually, the Dowager Duchess had requested Lillian bring her music, should anyone wish for informal entertainment. "It's a test," Aunt Constance said, reading the invitation with shrewd eyes. "Eleanor is introducing you to society under her protection. If people see the Dowager Duchess approves of you, the gossip from the ball will fade. Or it will make things worse," Lillian said. "Make people think I'm social climbing." "You are social climbing, dear, we all are. The question is whether you do it honestly or not." Her aunt set down the invitation. "But if you'd rather decline—" "No." Lillian surprised herself with the firmness of the word. No, I'll go. Because despite the risk, despite the uncertainty, she wanted to see him again. Wanted to understand the man who argued about crop rotation with the same intensity he watched her play Beethoven. Wanted to know if the connection she'd felt was real, or just another London illusion. The Ashworth estate at Thornfield sprawled across rolling green hills like a cat in sunshine. Comfortable, confident, claiming space without apology. Lillian pressed her face to the carriage window as they approached, taking in formal gardens that gave way to natural woodland, a lake glittering in the distance, and the house itself. Golden stone, large enough to be impressive, but not so enormous it felt like a museum. Someone had planted wildflowers along the drive, poppies and cornflowers and daisies growing in cheerful chaos between more formal roses. It made her smile. "Not what you expected?" Aunt Constance asked. "I don't know what I expected. Something more intimidating, I suppose. The London house is intimidating. This is where they actually live." Her aunt adjusted her bonnet. "Eleanor moved here permanently after her husband died. Ashworth splits his time, but I'm told he prefers the country when politics allow." The garden party was already underway when they arrived. Guests scattered across the south lawn in clusters of conversation and laughter, servants circulating with champagne and strawberries, a string quartet playing under the shade of massive oak trees. It should have been perfect. It would have been, except Lillian spotted Genevieve Wycliffe holding court near the fountain, her blonde hair shining in the sunlight, her laugh carrying across the lawn like a bell designed to draw attention. And next to her, looking significantly less pleased about it, stood Ashworth. "Deep breaths," Aunt Constance murmured. "You're invited. You belong here. Don't let some social climbing chit make you forget that." Eleanor Ashworth appeared before Lillian could respond, her smile warm and her greeting effusive. "Miss Fairmont, how lovely. Come, let me introduce you to some friends. They've been asking about your performance all week." The next hour passed in a whirlwind. Eleanor was strategic in her introductions, presenting Lillian to dowagers and debutantes, critics and composers, always with some comment about her talent or intelligence that made it clear the invitation was genuine, not charity. Slowly, Lillian felt her shoulders relax. These people weren't judging her. They were curious, and curiosity she could handle. It wasn't until the afternoon heat drove everyone toward the shade that she finally encountered Genevieve directly. "Miss Fairmont." Genevieve's voice was honey over steel. "How kind of the Dowager Duchess to take such an interest in new arrivals. She's always been so generous to those in need of patronage." Two girls flanking Genevieve tittered. Lillian recognized them from the ball, Lavinia's set, professional sycophants who laughed at cruelty and called it wit. "How kind of you to notice," Lillian replied evenly. "Though I confess I received my invitation through interest in music, not need. Perhaps the distinction isn't clear to everyone." Genevieve's smile sharpened. "Oh, we all heard about your little performance. My mother said you played very enthusiastically." "That's code for too loud," one of the girls whispered, not quite quietly enough. "I prefer to think of it as with feeling," Lillian said, "though I understand some people find genuine emotion uncomfortable." "Genuine?" Genevieve's laugh was crystalline and cold. "My dear, you're from Yorkshire. Half the ton thinks you walked here behind a plough." "Only half?" Lillian allowed herself a small smile. "I must be more refined than I thought." "You're certainly bold," Genevieve said, her voice dropping. "Dancing with a duke you'd never met, accepting invitations to his family home. Some might call that presumptuous or calculating, and some might call trying to force an engagement through rumor and social pressure desperate." The words escaped before Lillian could stop them, sharp and clear. "But I suppose we all have our strategies." The silence that fell was absolute. Genevieve's face flushed red, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The girls beside her looked genuinely shocked. Lillian's heart hammered in her chest. Too far. She'd gone too far. That was the kind of directness that got you exiled from polite society, but she couldn't regret it. "Excuse me," she said, with all the dignity she could muster. "I believe I need some air." She turned and walked toward the rose garden before anyone could respond, half expecting to hear outraged voices calling her back. But only silence followed, heavy, judging silence that felt worse than any open confrontation. She found a bench hidden between climbing roses and sat down before her knees could give out. What had she done? Aunt Constance had brought her to London for opportunity, and Lillian had just insulted the daughter of one of the most influential families in England, in front of witnesses, at a ducal garden party. This was worse than the dare at the ball. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. She jerked her head up. Ashworth stood at the garden entrance, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "I think we both know which," Lillian said quietly. "I should probably leave before I make things worse." By telling the truth? He moved closer, studying her with that same intensity she remembered from their dance. "Genevieve has been spreading rumors about an engagement for 3 months. Everyone knows it. No one says it. You just did. That doesn't make it appropriate." "No." He sat down beside her, close enough to be intimate, far enough to maintain propriety. "But it makes it honest, and I'm finding I appreciate honesty more than I appreciate appropriateness." Lillian looked at him properly for the first time since he'd arrived. His cravat was slightly loosened, his hair ruffled as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked tired, and younger than his 28 years. "Are you engaged to her?" she asked bluntly. "Because if you are, I owe her an apology regardless of what I think." "No." The word was firm, final. "And I've told Lady Wycliffe that repeatedly. She chooses not to believe me, or to spread rumors that make it true through sheer social pressure." "Why don't you contradict them publicly?" "Because her family controls votes I need for legislation I care about. Because making an enemy of Lord Wycliffe would cost me political capital I can't afford to lose." His jaw tightened. "Because sometimes the duchy demands I be strategic instead of honest." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." He turned to face her fully. "Which is why your company has been unexpectedly refreshing, Miss Fairmont. You say what you mean. You don't calculate every word for advantage." "Oh, I calculate." She offered a rueful smile. "I just do it poorly." That surprised a laugh out of him, a real one, unguarded and warm. The sound transformed his face completely, erasing the careful control and revealing someone younger, lighter, more like the man she suspected he'd been before duty buried him. "You calculate terribly," he agreed. "It's wonderful." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by roses and summer heat and the distant murmur of the party. "I should go back," Lillian finally said, "before people start talking about us disappearing together. They're already talking." But he stood, offering his hand to help her up. His grip was warm, steady, and he held on for a moment longer than necessary. "Let them." Easy for a duke to say. "Nothing about being a duke is easy." His expression turned serious. "But you're right. I have armor you don't, so let me use it." He released her hand but didn't step away. "Stay. Play for everyone later. My mother's hoping you will. Let them see you're here by invitation, by merit, not by scheme. And if Genevieve says something else, then I'll handle it." His voice held quiet certainty. "I should have months ago. I've been too concerned with political consequences and not concerned enough with basic decency." "Don't make enemies on my behalf," Lillian said. "I'm not worth that kind of trouble." "That," Ashworth said softly, "is where you're wrong." He offered his arm, formal and proper, and led her back to the party. They emerged from the rose garden to find Eleanor orchestrating a general movement toward the terrace where the piano had been brought outside for afternoon entertainment. "Perfect timing," she said, though her eyes were knowing. "Miss Fairmont, would you indulge us? I know you brought music." It was both rescue and test. Lillian understood that clearly. Eleanor was giving her a chance to remind everyone why she'd been invited, and to do it under the Dowager Duchess's explicit approval. "I'd be honored, Your Grace." The afternoon was hot, the piano slightly out of tune from being moved, and Lillian could feel Genevieve's hostile stare from across the terrace. But when she placed her hands on the keys and began playing, Vivaldi this time, bright and technical and impossible to perform without complete focus, the rest of it faded away. This was her gift, her weapon, her truth. She played 3 pieces without stopping, building from the Vivaldi to something more complex. A Mozart concerto that made her fingers fly and her heart race. By the time she finished, her hands ached and sweat dampened her temples, but the applause was thunderous. Even Genevieve couldn't argue with skill that obvious. "Magnificent," Eleanor said, embracing her warmly. "Absolutely magnificent." The rest of the afternoon transformed. People approached to compliment her playing, ask about her training, request their favorite pieces. She was no longer the provincial newcomer who'd been dared to dance with a duke. She was the musician the Dowager Duchess had championed. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. As sunset painted the sky golden pink, guests began departing. Lillian found herself alone on the terrace, watching servants pack up the piano when Ashworth joined her. "Thank you," he said simply. "For playing? For staying. For being yourself, despite excellent reasons to pretend otherwise." He leaned against the balustrade beside her. Most people would have retreated after what Genevieve said. "I'm too stubborn to retreat. My mother always said it would get me in trouble." "Your mother sounds wise." He paused, then added quietly, "I'm hosting a small dinner next week. Mostly political contacts I need to maintain cordial relations with, including the Wycliffes. It will be tedious and strategic and utterly lacking in genuine conversation." "That sounds dreadful." "It is, which is why I'd like you there." Lillian turned to stare at him. "You want me at a political dinner with the family trying to force you into an engagement with their daughter?" "I want at least one honest person in the room." His expression was serious. "And I want the Wycliffes to understand that their rumors haven't created the inevitability they hoped for." "Using me as a political statement sounds unfair to you," he interrupted. "Yes, I know. But I'm asking anyway, because I'm selfish enough to want your company even if my motives aren't entirely pure." She should say no. This was dangerous, not just socially but emotionally. She was starting to care about this complicated, careful man who argued about farming and attended political dinners he hated, and looked at her like she was water after a drought. "Will there be music?" she asked instead. His mouth curved slightly. "If you want there to be, then I'll come. But I'm bringing my aunt. I wouldn't have it any other way." They stood together as the sun set and the last carriages departed, not touching, not speaking, but sharing the same silence. It felt like a promise neither of them was ready to name. The dinner at Ashworth's London residence was exactly as advertised, tedious, strategic, and suffocating, with unspoken tension. Lord Wycliffe held court at one end of the table, pontificating about trade policy, while Ashworth listened with the expression of someone mentally calculating crop yields. Lady Wycliffe, resplendent in emerald silk, smiled at everyone, while her eyes tracked Lillian's every movement like a cat watching a mouse. And Genevieve, positioned directly across from Ashworth, sparkled and flirted with the determination of someone trying to win a battle through sheer force of will. "Don't you agree, Your Grace?" she asked for the third time, her smile bright and insistent. "A proper ducal residence requires at least 12 guest rooms. Anything less is simply inadequate for entertaining." "I have 14 guest rooms," Ashworth said neutrally, "though I rarely fill them." "Oh, but you will. Once you marry, the social obligations will increase dramatically." She glanced at Lillian with calculated innocence. "A duke's wife must be prepared for constant entertaining. It's quite demanding for those accustomed to simpler circumstances. Miss Fairmont manages her aunt's household in London," Eleanor interjected smoothly from her position at the table's head. "She's proven quite capable of navigating society's demands." "Oh, of course." Genevieve's tone suggested the opposite. "I simply meant that the ducal role requires certain refinements, family connections, understanding of political necessities." "It requires competence," Ashworth said, his voice cutting through the careful politeness. "Everything else is decoration." The table fell silent. Lady Wycliffe's smile froze. Genevieve looked like she'd been slapped. "Naturally," Lord Wycliffe said after an awkward pause, "though one hopes for both competence and appropriate connections." "One hopes for many things," Ashworth replied. "Reality is often disappointing." The conversation limped forward from there, growing increasingly strained. By the time the ladies retired to the drawing room, Lillian's jaw ached from maintaining a neutral expression. "He's being deliberately obtuse," Lady Wycliffe said the moment the door closed, her voice sharp with frustration. "Everyone knows he needs our support in Parliament. This resistance is nothing but stubborn pride." "Perhaps he simply doesn't wish to marry your daughter," Aunt Constance said with dangerous sweetness. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. "He will come around," Lady Wycliffe said, her composure cracking slightly. "Once he realizes his alternatives are limited." "Limited how?" Lillian asked before she could stop herself. Lady Wycliffe's gaze fixed on her like a snake focusing on prey. "Limited by reality, my dear. The Duke requires a wife of appropriate breeding and connections. Someone who understands the responsibilities of the position, not some provincial musician who stumbled into his notice through a foolish dare." "Mother," Genevieve said, touching her mother's arm in warning. But Lady Wycliffe shook her off. "Let's not pretend otherwise. You're charming enough, Miss Fairmont, and your playing is technically proficient, but you're a novelty, an entertainment, nothing more." The words landed like physical blows. Lillian felt heat crawl up her neck, anger and humiliation warring in her chest. "At least I'm honest about what I am," she said quietly. "I've never pretended to be anything else or spread rumors to force someone's hand." "How dare you? How dare I?" Lillian stood, abandoning all pretense of politeness. "Your daughter has been telling half of London she's engaged to a man who has never proposed. You've been using social pressure to manipulate him into a marriage he doesn't want. And you're calling me the problem." "Lillian," Aunt Constance said warningly, but Lillian was past caring. Weeks of careful smiles and swallowed retorts boiled over. "I may be provincial and awkward and completely unsuited for this world, but at least I'm not trying to trap someone into marriage through lies and social coercion." She met Lady Wycliffe's furious gaze directly. "So yes, I'm a novelty, but I'm an honest one." "You're a fool." Lady Wycliffe's voice was ice. "You think he cares about you. You're a momentary distraction. Once he realizes what refusing us will cost him, he'll do what's necessary. And you'll be forgotten." "Perhaps," Lillian said, "but at least I won't have forced him." She walked out before anyone could respond, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She made it to the library before the tears came. Tears of anger and shame, and the horrible suspicion that Lady Wycliffe was right. She was a novelty, a distraction, a provincial girl who'd read more into a few kind words than was warranted. "Miss Fairmont?" She spun around to find Ashworth standing in the doorway, his expression dark. "I heard raised voices. My mother sent me to investigate." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Improper, scandalous, and she couldn't bring herself to care. What did Lady Wycliffe say? The truth, probably. She wiped her eyes roughly. That I'm a foolish provincial who doesn't understand my place. That you're being polite, but I'm just a temporary entertainment until you do what's politically necessary. And you believe her? "I don't know." The words burst out, ragged and honest. "I don't know how this works. Don't know what any of this means. I thought—" She stopped, unable to finish. "You thought what?" He moved closer, his voice low and intent. "I thought maybe you actually liked my company. That the conversations were real. That the way you looked at me when I played meant something. But maybe I'm just naive enough to confuse courtesy with care. Lillian." He said her name like a prayer, a curse, a surrender. "Look at me." She did, reluctantly, and found his expression stripped of all the careful control she'd grown accustomed to. "I haven't been courteous," he said. "I've been terrified. Because you're right. I do care. More than I should, faster than makes sense, and it's terrifying because caring makes me vulnerable in ways I can't afford. Then why? Because the alternative is worse." He took her hands, his grip warm and steady. "Living the rest of my life, calculating every interaction, marrying someone I respect but don't love, becoming the kind of duke my father was, powerful, lonely, and fundamentally hollow." His voice dropped. "You make me remember who I wanted to be before I became what I had to be. That's not fair to you or me. Nothing about this is fair." His thumb traced circles on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. "But I'm asking anyway. Stay. Let me navigate this mess. Let me prove that you're not a distraction. You're the first real thing that's happened to me in years." "What about the Wycliffes, the political consequences?" "I'll handle them. I should have months ago." His jaw set with determination. "But I need to know if you want me to. If this is something you want to pursue, or if I'm the one being foolish." Lillian looked at their joined hands, at his face open and uncertain in a way she'd never seen before, and felt something shift in her chest. "I want it," she whispered. "I want this, even though it's terrifying and complicated and might end badly." "Then we'll be terrified together." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a vow. "And hope it ends well." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility and promise, until the sound of footsteps in the hallway forced them apart. But when they rejoined the others, something had changed. Ashworth sat beside her instead of across from her, his attention pointedly focused on their conversation rather than Genevieve's attempts to reclaim it. And when Lady Wycliffe made another pointed comment about appropriate marriages, he met it with polite but unmistakable firmness. "I appreciate your concern, Lady Wycliffe, but I believe I'm capable of determining my own future." The evening ended early, the Wycliffes departing with barely concealed fury. As Lillian and her aunt prepared to leave, Eleanor pulled her aside. "That took courage," she said quietly. "Standing up to Marianne Wycliffe takes nerve, and you have it. I probably made everything worse. Perhaps. Or perhaps you did what someone should have done months ago." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Either way, you were honest, and that matters more than you know." In the carriage home, Aunt Constance was uncharacteristically quiet until they were nearly to Cavendish Square. "Are you in love with him?" she asked bluntly. Lillian opened her mouth to deny it, then stopped, because denying it would be another lie and she was tired of lies. "I think I might be," she said softly. "I know it's foolish and fast and sometimes that's how it happens." Her aunt's expression was unexpectedly gentle. "Your uncle and I fell in love in 3 weeks. Everyone said it was too quick, too impetuous. We were married 42 years before he died." She paused. "But loving a duke is different than loving a regular man, Lillian. You'll be scrutinized, judged, never entirely safe from gossip or social warfare. Are you prepared for that?" "No," Lillian said honestly, "but I think I want to try anyway." "Then try, but be prepared for the cost." The cost came 3 days later. Lillian was having tea with 2 ladies Eleanor had introduced her to when the butler entered with a note. She opened it absently, expecting another invitation, and felt the world tilt. The handwriting was elegant and vicious. "Miss Fairmont, I feel it is my duty to inform you of certain realities you seem unaware of. The Duke of Ashworth owes my husband significant political debts. His recent legislation regarding tenant rights will fail without our family's support in Parliament. His mother's dower properties are entailed in ways that require Wycliffe votes to resolve. In short, he cannot afford to refuse our expectations. You are a pleasant distraction, but distractions end when reality reasserts itself. For your own dignity, I suggest you withdraw from this situation before you are publicly humiliated. I remain with regards, Lady Marianne Wycliffe." Lillian's hands shook as she set down the note. The words burned themselves into her memory, each one a poisoned dart. "Bad news?" one of the ladies asked. "No," Lillian lied. "Just a change of plans." She made her excuses and left early, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely false. Back in her room, she read the note 3 more times, each reading making her feel smaller, more foolish, more certain that Lady Wycliffe was right. Ashworth needed the Wycliffe votes. That was political reality. He might care about her, might even believe what he'd said in the library. But when the choice came, her or his legislative agenda, her or his political future, what would he choose? And if he chose her, would he resent her forever for the cost? The knock on her door came an hour later. Aunt Constance entered without waiting for permission, took one look at Lillian's face, and sat down on the bed. "What happened?" Lillian handed her the note. Her aunt's expression darkened as she read. "That vindictive shrew. She's trying to frighten you into withdrawing. What if she's right?" "She is right, about the political realities. Ashworth does need their votes. His tenant rights bill will fail without Wycliffe's support, and it's good legislation that would help thousands of people." Constance set down the note. "But that doesn't mean you should make the decision for him. It means I should be realistic about my place in his life." "Your place?" Her aunt's voice sharpened. "Lillian, you are not an interchangeable piece on a political game board. You are a person with value independent of your utility. If he chooses his career over you, that's his decision, but don't make it for him out of fear." "I'm not afraid," You're terrified. I can see it. Constance gripped her shoulders. You're afraid he'll choose duty, so you're considering leaving first to avoid the pain. But that's cowardice dressed up as nobility. The words stung because they were true. Lillian had been planning exactly that. A graceful withdrawal before she was pushed out. Return to Yorkshire, to safety, to the life where heartbreak was less complicated. What do I do? She whispered. You talk to him. You show him the note. You let him make his own choice. Her aunt's expression softened. And if he chooses wrong, we go home with our dignity intact, but you don't run before knowing. Lillian nodded, throat too tight to speak. The next day she sent a note to Ashworth requesting a private audience. His response came within the hour. Thornfield. Tomorrow. Please. The ride to the country estate felt both too long and too short. Lillian rehearsed speeches, imagined conversations, and discarded them all. How did you ask someone to choose between you and everything they'd worked for? Ashworth was waiting in the rose garden when she arrived. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, suggesting sleepless nights. Thank you for coming, he said. I was afraid you wouldn't. I almost didn't. She pulled Lady Wycliffe's note from her reticule and handed it to him. But I thought you should see this first. She watched his expression darken as he read, watched his jaw clench and his hands tighten around the paper until it crumpled. When did you receive this? Yesterday. And you still came. He looked at her with something like wonder. Even after reading this, you still came. I needed to hear from you, not her. Lillian took a breath. Is it true? About the votes, the legislation, the political consequences? Yes. He didn't lie to her, didn't soften it. Everything she said is accurate. My tenant rights bill will fail without Wycliffe support. It's good legislation. Would limit rent increases, prevent arbitrary evictions, give people security. Thousands would benefit. Then, but here's what she didn't tell you. His voice was hard. The Wycliffes are manipulating the situation. They're threatening to withhold support unless I marry Genevieve, but they'd benefit from the legislation passing. Their own tenants are on the edge of revolt. They're using good policy as leverage to force a marriage that serves their interests, not mine. What will you do? I'll find other votes, make other alliances, pass the legislation without them. He stepped closer. What I won't do is sacrifice you to their blackmail. But if you can't find other support, then the bill fails this session. I reintroduce it next year with different coalition. His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Lillian, I'm not choosing between you and helping people. I'm choosing between you and giving the Wycliffes exactly the power they shouldn't have. You're certain? I've never been more certain of anything. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I spent 2 years doing what was expected, being what was necessary, calculating every decision based on political advantage. It was killing something in me. You brought it back. That person who believed duty and happiness weren't mutually exclusive. That's a lot of responsibility, she said shakily. Then we'll carry it together. He leaned his forehead against hers. But I need to know you're willing, that you're not going to disappear the moment this gets difficult. It's already difficult. Then stay anyway, fight with me. Let me prove that you're worth more than political expediency. Lillian closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the choice settle over her. She could retreat now, return to Yorkshire, to safety. Or she could stay and face whatever came next. Scandal, social warfare, uncertainty. I'll stay, she whispered, but you have to promise me something. Anything. If there comes a point where choosing me truly means destroying something you care about, something that matters beyond politics or pride, you have to tell me. You can't sacrifice your principles for me and then resent me for it. He pulled back to look at her properly. I promise. But you have to promise something too. What? Trust that I know my own mind, that when I choose you it's not weakness or infatuation or avoiding difficult decisions. It's choosing the future I want instead of the one I'm told I should have. I promise to try. Good enough. He kissed her forehead, gentle and sure. Now come inside. My mother's been baking, which means she's worried, and she'll feel better if she can feed us. The domesticity of it made Lillian laugh despite everything. The Dowager Duchess bakes? Stress baking. You should have seen the kitchen when my father died. We had enough scones to feed the entire county." They walked back to the house hand in hand, and for the first time since the ball, Lillian let herself believe it might actually work out. But reality, as Lady Wycliffe had promised, had other plans. The scandal broke 3 weeks later, timed perfectly to cause maximum damage. Lillian was at a musical afternoon at Lady Pemberton's when she noticed the whispers starting. Heads bent together, eyes cutting toward her with something between pity and glee. By the time she excused herself to find Aunt Constance, everyone knew. Someone, and it didn't take genius to guess who, had spread a rumour that Lillian had been seen leaving Ashworth's London residence late at night, alone, without proper chaperoning. The implication was clear and vicious. She was trying to trap him into marriage through scandal. "It's not true," Lillian said numbly, as her aunt steered her toward their carriage. "I was never there without you or his mother present." Truth doesn't matter when the lie is more interesting. Constance's face was grim. Someone wants you discredited before Ashworth makes any formal declaration. The note waiting at home confirmed it. Not from Lady Wycliffe this time, but from someone claiming to be a concerned friend. Detailed descriptions of supposed late-night visits, claims that Lillian had been seen entering through the servants' entrance, speculation about how a provincial nobody had caught the interest of a duke. Each word was designed to paint her as calculating, manipulative, and desperate. Ashworth arrived within the hour, fury radiating off him like heat. "It's lies," he said without preamble. "All of it. I'm issuing a public statement." "No." Lillian's voice came out steadier than she felt. "That will only make it worse. If you defend me too strongly, it looks like you're trying to protect your own reputation. If you're dismissive, it confirms I'm not important enough to matter. Then what do you suggest?" "Nothing." She met his eyes. "We ignore it and let it die. While they destroy your reputation? It's already damaged. The question is whether we give them more ammunition." She took a shaky breath. "Lady Wycliffe wants you to choose, me or your political future. This is her forcing the choice publicly. Then I'll choose publicly." His jaw set with determination. Please don't." The words escaped before she could stop them. "Not like this. Not when it looks like you're being forced by scandal instead of choosing freely." He stared at her. "You're asking me to do nothing while they drag you through the mud. I'm asking you to be strategic instead of reactive." She forced herself to think past the hurt, the humiliation. "If you declare for me now, it looks like damage control. If we weather this and you choose me later, it's genuine. And in the meantime, I survive. I've done it before." She tried to smile. "I'm provincial, remember? We're resilient." But resilience, Lillian discovered, had limits. The invitations dried up within days. Not entirely. Eleanor still included her in small gatherings, and a few genuine friends remained loyal. But the broader social world closed its doors with the finality of coffin lids. Even worse were the looks, pitying, judging, speculative. The whispers that followed her at the few events she still attended. Poor thing. Thought she could catch a duke. So obvious what she was trying. At least he had the sense to see through it. "My mother says she's been sent home to Yorkshire. Good riddance." Lillian endured it with gritted teeth and frozen smiles, but each cut went deep. Ashworth called daily, increasingly frustrated by her refusal to let him defend her publicly. "This is destroying you," he said during one particularly difficult visit. "I can see it. Then don't look." She kept her voice light, knowing if she let it break, she'd shatter completely. "I'm fine. You're not fine. You're miserable and pretending otherwise." "What do you want me to say?" The control finally cracked. "That I hate this, that I wake up every morning wondering if coming to London was the worst mistake of my life, that I'm terrified you'll wake up one day and realize defending me isn't worth the cost. Lillian, you have power I don't have. You can afford to be brave. But I'm the one they're destroying, and I'm trying very hard not to take you down with me." Tears burned her eyes. "So please, just let me survive this my way." He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself break finally in the safety of his embrace. "I'm going to fix this," he murmured against her hair. "I promise." But some things, Lillian was learning, couldn't be fixed, only endured. The breaking point came at a charity concert 3 weeks later. Lillian had been asked to perform, a genuine invitation from the organizing committee, who cared more about talent than scandal. She'd accepted gratefully, desperate for something she could still do well. The performance went beautifully. She played Chopin with every ounce of emotion the past weeks had wrung from her, and the audience responded with genuine appreciation. But during the intermission, she overheard a conversation that shattered whatever fragile hope she'd been clinging to. "Ashworth's going to announce his engagement at the season's final ball," Lady Wycliffe was saying to a cluster of women. "To my Genevieve. He's finally accepted reality. After all that drama with the provincial girl, how gauche. Oh, that was nothing. A momentary lapse. He's too intelligent to throw away his political future for infatuation." Lillian's vision tunneled. She made it to the retiring room before the tears came, pressing her hands against the wall to stay upright. It was over. He'd made his choice, and it wasn't her. She'd known it would come eventually, had told herself she was prepared. But preparation meant nothing against the actual pain of it. "Miss Fairmont." She looked up to find Eleanor standing in the doorway, her expression stricken. "You heard," the Dowager Duchess said quietly. Lillian nodded, not trusting her voice. "It's not true. Marianne is spreading lies again." "Is it?" Lillian wiped her eyes roughly. "The final ball is in 2 weeks. Has he told you his plans?" Eleanor's hesitation was answer enough. "He's been in meetings with Wycliffe allies all week," the older woman admitted, "trying to salvage the legislation, but he hasn't said anything about an engagement. Because he's going to make the practical choice." Lillian's voice was flat. "And I don't blame him. The legislation matters. People need it. I'm just me. You're the woman my son loves. Love isn't always enough." She straightened, forcing composure back into place. "Thank you for everything, Your Grace. You've been kinder to me than I deserved. Lillian, I should return home, to Yorkshire. There's nothing left for me here." She left before Eleanor could argue, before she could be talked into staying, before hope could worm its way back in and break her all over again. The next morning she began packing. "Are you certain?" Aunt Constance asked, watching her fold gowns with mechanical precision. "Yes." Lillian didn't look up. "I tried. It didn't work. Time to go home." "And Ashworth?" "We'll do what's necessary, as he should." She pressed down harder on a dress, smoothing imaginary wrinkles. "I was a distraction. Now I'm not. It's simple. Nothing about this is simple. No. But pretending otherwise was destroying me." Her aunt was quiet for a long moment. "When do you want to leave?" "Tomorrow. Before the final ball. Before she had to watch him announce his engagement to Genevieve. Before the last shred of hope died completely. Then we'll leave tomorrow." That night, Lillian wrote a letter she'd never send, pouring out everything she couldn't say to his face. How much she loved him. How proud she was of him for choosing duty. How she hoped he'd find happiness, even if it wasn't with her. She sealed it, addressed it to no one, and tucked it in her trunk as a monument to feelings she'd never voice. The knock came at midnight. Lillian almost didn't answer. She was half undressed, exhausted, emotionally wrung out. But something made her open the door. Ashworth stood in the hallway, disheveled and wild-eyed. "You're leaving," he said. Not a question. "In the morning." She kept the door partially closed, unable to handle seeing him. "It's better this way." "Better for who?" "Both of us." Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. "You need to make the practical choice, I understand that, but I can't watch you do it. What if I don't want to make the practical choice?" "Then you're a fool." The words came out harsh, desperate. "Those people need that legislation. You've worked for 2 years on it. I won't let you throw it away for what? Say it." "For me." The admission tore out of her. "I'm not worth that kind of sacrifice. I'm nobody. Just a girl who plays piano and doesn't understand your world and keeps making everything more complicated. You're right about one thing." He pushed past her into the room, improper and urgent and past caring. "You don't understand? Then explain it. The legislation matters, but do you know what else matters? Living a life I can respect. Being someone my future children won't be ashamed of." His hands gripped her shoulders. "Marrying Genevieve would get me political victories. It would also make me exactly like my father. Powerful, strategic, and fundamentally empty. That's not fair. It's completely fair. I watched him choose duty over happiness every day of his life. He died respected and miserable, surrounded by people who valued his title but never knew him. His voice dropped. I won't do that. I won't sacrifice the one genuine thing in my life because it's politically inconvenient. What about the people who need the legislation? I'll find another way, make different alliances, take longer. His thumbs brushed her cheeks, gentle despite the intensity in his voice. But I won't trade you for it. And I'm done pretending political necessity justifies emotional cowardice. The Wycliffes said, the Wycliffes have been lying. Frustration bled through. There is no engagement announcement planned. There never was. Marianne has been spreading rumors to force my hand, and I've been too concerned with avoiding confrontation to shut them down properly. But you've been in meetings, finding other votes, building a coalition that doesn't require selling myself to the Wycliffes. He pulled her closer. It's taken weeks, but I have the numbers. The legislation will pass without them. Lillian stared at him, afraid to believe. You're certain? I had the final commitment this afternoon. That's why I came tonight. I needed to tell you before you left. His expression turned fierce. You are not a distraction. You are not a complication. You are the reason I remembered why I wanted to be a duke in the first place, to make things better, not just maintain power. That's still a lot of responsibility. Then carry it with me. His forehead pressed to hers. Stay. Let me court you properly. Let me prove this is real, not political strategy or temporary infatuation. And if the scandal never dies, if I'm always the provincial girl who trapped a duke, then we'll face it together. And eventually we'll build something that matters more than their opinions. The words settled over her like sunlight after storm. Not a promise of easy, but a promise of real. I want to stay, she whispered. I'm terrified, but I want to stay. Then stay. He kissed her, soft and sure and full of promise. And tomorrow, we stop hiding. The season's final ball arrived with the weight of reckoning. Lillian dressed carefully, not in the elaborate gowns others would wear, but in simple pale gold that made her feel like herself. If this was going to be her public stand, she'd do it honestly. Aunt Constance surveyed her with approval. Ready? No, but I'm going anyway. The ballroom was already full when they arrived, the cream of London society gathered for the season's climactic event. Lillian felt every eye turned toward her as they entered, felt the whispers surge like tide. She lifted her chin and walked forward. Eleanor found them immediately, drawing Lillian into a warm embrace. You came. Your son can be very persuasive. He learned from the best. Eleanor's smile was knowing. He's in the card room making final arrangements. He'll be out soon. Arrangements for what? You'll see. The next hour was strange. People approached with a mix of curiosity and caution, conversations strained but not openly hostile. The worst of the gossips kept their distance, but a few genuine friends rallied visibly. It felt like standing on a precipice, waiting for someone to push. The push came from an unexpected direction. Miss Fairmont. Genevieve Wycliffe appeared in a gown of ice blue, her beauty cold and perfect. How brave of you to attend. I was invited. Oh, certainly. But given recent rumors, she trailed off meaningfully. I hope you're not here hoping for some grand declaration. That would be embarrassing. The only thing I'm hoping for is an enjoyable evening. Lillian kept her voice level. Though I appreciate your concern, I'm simply trying to spare you humiliation. Genevieve's smile sharpened. Ashworth has duties you don't understand, responsibilities. He may have been momentarily diverted by your novelty, but nothing. Ashworth's voice cut through the space between them. He'd appeared without either of them noticing, his expression carved from ice. Miss Wycliffe, I believe we've had this conversation before, multiple times. Genevieve's composure cracked. Your Grace, I am not engaged to you. I have never been engaged to you. My mother has never suggested I should be engaged to you. His voice carried across the suddenly silent space around them. If there have been rumors to the contrary, they did not originate with me or anyone I've authorized to speak on my behalf. But Father said, your father has been attempting to leverage political pressure into a personal relationship. It was inappropriate then. It remains inappropriate now. He turned to Lillian, his expression softening dramatically. "Miss Fairmont, would you do me the honor of the next dance?" Every eye in the ballroom fixed on them. The orchestra, sensing the moment, struck up a waltz. Lillian took his hand and let him lead her onto the floor. "That was very public," she murmured as they began to move. "That was overdue." His grip was firm, steady. "I should have done it months ago." They danced in silence for several measures, the room watching with hungry attention. Then Ashworth spoke, his voice quiet but carrying in the hushed space. "I need to tell you something." Lillian's heart stuttered. "Here, now." "Here, now." He met her eyes directly. "I love you, not because you're convenient or politically useful or temporarily interesting. I love you because you're honest and brave, and you make me remember who I wanted to be before duty buried him. James." His given name escaped before she could stop it. "I know this is fast. I know you deserve proper courtship and time to be certain, but I also know I don't want to waste another day pretending this is anything less than what it is." His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the audience. "So I'm asking, publicly properly, if you would consider allowing me to court you, with intention, with everyone watching, with the full understanding that I'm choosing you, and nothing about that choice is accidental." The ballroom had gone completely silent. 300 people holding their breath. Lillian felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were the right kind. "Yes," she said simply. "I would be honored." The smile that broke across his face was transformative, joy replacing the careful control she'd grown accustomed to. He looked young, unburdened, free. "Thank you," he said. Then louder, for everyone to hear. "Thank you." The music swelled around them, and they danced as the ton processed what they'd just witnessed. A duke publicly declaring intention, choosing love over political convenience, making his position unmistakably clear. By the time the waltz ended, the whispers had shifted tone. Not malicious now, but speculative, calculating. If Ashworth was serious, and that declaration left no doubt, then Lillian Fairmont wasn't a scandal to be dismissed. She was the future Duchess of Ashworth. Power followed intention in this world, and he'd just given her his. Lady Wycliffe appeared as they left the dance floor, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. "You'll regret this," she hissed at Ashworth, low enough that only they could hear. "My husband has no power over me." Ashworth's voice was cold. "Your votes are no longer necessary. Your threats are meaningless. And your daughter deserves better than being used as a political bargaining chip." He paused. "I suggest you find her a husband who actually wants her, rather than one you're trying to manipulate into taking her." "How dare—" "I dare because I'm done playing games." He offered Lillian his arm. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe they're serving supper." They walked away, leaving Lady Wycliffe speechless in their wake. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of carefully worded congratulations and thinly veiled assessment. People who'd cut Lillian weeks ago now sought her attention. Allies repositioned themselves. The social landscape shifted with the speed of wind-changing direction. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and deeply strange. "Is it always like this?" Lillian asked during a brief moment alone with Eleanor. "Like what?" "People pretending the last month never happened, acting like they always supported me." "Always?" Eleanor's expression was sympathetic. "They follow power, not principle. You're powerful now because my son made you so. Get used to the hypocrisy." "I don't think I can." "Then don't." The Dowager Duchess squeezed her hand. "Be genuine. Be kind to the few who were kind to you first. Let the rest curry favor if they must, but don't trust it." She paused. "Though I suspect you're wise enough to know that already." "I hope so." Lillian watched Ashworth across the room, deep in conversation with political allies who were already adjusting to the new reality. "I just don't want to disappoint him." "You won't. You couldn't if you tried." Eleanor's voice held quiet certainty. "He chose you because you're nothing like this world. Don't try to become something you're not just to fit their expectations." The words settled deep, a reminder Lillian suspected she'd need many times in the years ahead. As midnight approached, Ashworth found her near the terrace doors, looking exhausted but content. "Ready to leave?" he asked. More than ready. He handed her into the carriage with gentle care, then settled beside her with a sigh of relief. That was terrifying, Lillian said. That was necessary. He took her hand, threading their fingers together. But yes, also terrifying. What happens now? Now I caught you properly. Spend time with your family. I'd like to meet your brothers. Get to know you outside of ballrooms and political warfare. He lifted her hand to his lips. Build something real instead of strategic. And the legislation? Passes next week without Wycliffe's support as promised. Pride flickered in his voice. It wasn't easy, but it's done. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us. He kissed her knuckles again, lingering. You could have left. No one would have blamed you, but you stayed. I was terrified. So was I. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Still am occasionally, but less so with you beside me. They rode in comfortable silence the rest of the way, hands linked, futures stretching ahead like an unwritten page. It wasn't perfect. The scandal's echoes would follow them for months, years maybe. Some people would always question her motives, his judgment. There would be more Lady Wycliffes, more challenges, more moments of doubt, but they would face them together. And that, Lillian was learning, mattered more than any amount of social approval. 6 months later, Lillian played piano in the Thornfield music room while early snow fell outside. The room was warm, the instrument perfectly tuned, and for the first time since arriving in London, she felt completely at peace. The door opened quietly. She didn't stop playing Bach this time, technically challenging and emotionally complex, but she smiled. Ashworth sat down beside her on the bench, close enough that their shoulders touched. Your brothers arrive tomorrow, he said when she finished the piece. I know, I'm nervous. They'll love me, I bribed them with horses. You didn't. I absolutely did. 3 horses total, excellent breeding, 1 for each of them. His expression was unrepentant. I'm courting their approval as thoroughly as I courted yours. You're ridiculous. I'm strategic. He kissed her temple. And I want your family to know I value you enough to value them. They already know that. Your letters made it clear. Written declarations and personal proof are different things. He shifted to face her fully. I want them to see us together. See that this works. See that you're happy. I am happy. She met his eyes, stupidly, terrifyingly happy. Good. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Because I'm going to ask your father's permission tomorrow. And then, if he agrees and you're willing, I'd like to be engaged by spring. Her heart stuttered. That's fast. We've known each other 8 months. I've courted you properly, met your family, proven this isn't infatuation. His voice held quiet certainty. I don't need more time to be sure. But if you do, I don't. The words escaped before she could second-guess them. I'm sure. I've been sure for months. I was just afraid to hope. Then hope. He cupped her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. Because I'm not going anywhere. She kissed him, soft and sure and full of promise. Outside, snow continued falling, silent, steady, covering the world in new white. Inside, the fire crackled, and the piano held notes that had already faded, but somehow still lingered. This was home. Not London or Yorkshire or any specific place. This, the man beside her, the music between them, the future they were building together. This was everything. Thank you for staying until the end. I hope this story reminded you that choosing authentically, even when it's terrifying, is always worth it. Your presence here makes these stories possible, and I'm grateful for every moment you've spent listening. If you enjoyed Lillian and James's journey, please like this video and leave a comment about your favorite moment. It helps other listeners find these stories. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one, because I have more tales of courage and love waiting for you. Thank you for being here. You're the reason I write these stories. For you, for the moments when you need to believe that love and honesty can win even in complicated worlds.